I tried beating the Aerovelence mod in Terraria. This mod introduces tons of brand new weapons, armor sets, and even bosses into the game, centered around the theme of space. Will I be able to defeat Cyvercry, the final boss of this mod? Well, let's find out. I started off by spawning into the world, consuming my starter bag, and then I went to go chop down trees. I went to go check some of the crafting recipes, and upon finding that I needed slate slabs, which we actually obtained by killing mobs in the underground, I started digging myself a elevator in order to try and find these mobs. I stumbled upon this white granite biome, got myself a marble musket, which was a ranged weapon that actually did not consume any type of ammo and dealt 3 times the damage on its 3rd shot. I used this as my main weapon for a little bit, and I farmed out a bunch of mobs in the underground to get myself the slate slabs. Upon coming back to spawn, I actually managed to craft myself one of the slate pickaxes and a slate sword, and after this I ventured to try to get more of these slate slabs so I could craft myself a full set of slate armor. I went back to the white marble biome, farmed out even more mobs to get myself more slate slabs, and upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself a slate axe, got myself a bunch of wood, built myself a ton of NPC houses, and as it turned to nighttime, I actually summoned in the Eye of Cthulhu. Using the marble musket, we managed to take it out so we could check off that boss off the checklist, and then next I went over to the underground in order to mine up this very brand new ore. This was called Fantic ore, and we could actually craft a brand new set of armor using that, as well as a whole new set of weapons. This was the direct upgrade to all the slate tools that we had, so getting geared up with this was our next goal. I continued digging my elevator, and once I came back to spawn, I actually crafted myself a sword and a yo-yo using these Fantic bars. These were actually fairly decent weapons, and with my new arsenal of weapons and my new gain confidence, I went over to the left side of the world, stumbled upon Skeletron's dungeon, went down into the corruption biome, and went to blow up a couple of orbs. I decided to not actually summon in the Eater of Worlds as I was not quite ready yet, but upon breaking some of the orbs we could actually let the meteorite spawn in, so we were gonna wait for that. As I came back to spawn, I actually realized that we needed to defeat the Eater of Worlds and obtain shadow scales in order to craft ourselves the Fantic armor. So instead of this, I made myself a full set of slate armor, finishing off the armor set, and then after this my next goal was to fight the Eater of Worlds. While I was traveling over to the left side of the world, I found and picked up the meteor, and after this, upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself a very interesting weapon called the Dune Tessin. This was essentially like the vampire knives, except they did not heal you. I went down to mine for more ore so we can get more Fantic bars, as well as a bunch of other various resources such as iron that we're gonna need later within the game, and then after this I went over to the corruption, chucked some bombs at the orbs, and summoned in the Eater of Worlds. We managed to take him out using the Dune Tessin, letting us finally upgrade to all of the tremendous Fantic gear that I was very ready to already upgrade to. Upon coming back home, I crafted myself a full set of Fantic armor, I got myself a Fantic pickaxe, and once I had this, I went down my elevator and started collecting a bunch of hellstone. I got myself tons of hellstone, picked up a bunch of obsidian, and as I came back to spawn, we actually got invaded by goblins. Using the Dune Tessin, we took out as many of the goblins as we could. I got myself a bunch of money, and after I defeated the goblin army, I went all the way down to the underworld and actually started building myself an arena for the Wall of Flesh. Upon realizing that before fighting the Wall of Flesh there was still lots to do, I went over to the jungle, and while exploring near the jungle, I managed to find a brand new biome. This, I'm fairly certain, is called the Crystal Caverns, and within here we can actually get very important crafting materials such as cavern stones, charged cavern stones, and cavern crystals. These we could use to craft things such as Kelvin's Core, which comes in handy when crafting the best pre-Wall of Flesh armor in the Aerovelence mod. I picked up a bunch of resources from this biome, and upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself the Crystalized Blade using 15 Fantic bars. Right after this, I built myself an arena at spawn for some of the bosses that we're gonna fight later. I went over to explore some of the Sky Islands, and then once I came over to Skeletron's dungeon, I waited for it to turn to nighttime, I summoned him in, and then using the Dune Tessin and the yo-yo that we had, we absolutely demolished Skeletron, giving us access to his dungeon. I went over to his dungeon to pick up a bunch of water candles and explore some of the chests to see if we can get anything good. While farming out the Blood Moon at spawn, I actually managed to get a set of wings that of course we couldn't use up until hard mode, but that was still fairly interesting because almost as soon as we defeat the Wall of Flesh, we will actually have access to flight. After this, I went down over to the underworld, tried to farm out for some guide voodoo demons, and I actually managed to get one quite quickly. I came back to spawn, bought a bunch of buffs, and as I came down to the underworld, I chucked the guide voodoo doll into the lava and then fought the Wall of Flesh. I was using a brand new weapon that I actually actually just managed to find in my inventory called the Light of the Ancients, which was this very interesting flintlock pistol. And then after this, I proceeded to absolutely demolish the wall of flesh with the Dune Tessin, putting us into hard mode very quickly. The first thing I did as I got into hard mode was bless the world with all the hard mode ores. So we blessed it with palladium, orichalcum, adamantite, and then I crafted myself a molten pickaxe to go through the grueling pickaxe progression. I made myself a palladium pickaxe, got myself a bunch of orichalcum, made myself an orichalcum pickaxe and anvil, and then got myself a plethora of titanium. As I came back to spawn, I actually realized that there was a brand new boss summon that we could craft for one of the Aerovelence bosses. Before being actually able to fight the boss, I needed to get a bunch of more resources, so I went over to the underground hallowed biome to get myself a bunch of souls of light. I went down to the underground corruption biome to get myself tons of souls of night, and then upon coming back to spawn, I made myself a full set of adamantite armor, and then once I had myself a full set of adamantite armor, I also crafted myself this brand new Reaper Scythe looking weapon called the Cydia. Using this as it turned to nighttime, I summoned in and absolutely shredded through the destroyer. Using the brand new souls of might and hallowed bars that we got, I crafted myself an adamantite pulsar, which was one of the starter hard mode guns. And then after this, I summoned in and fought the twins using the adamantite pulsar and the Cydia, and of course we took them out with no trouble whatsoever. But before fighting Skeletron Prime and any of the later bosses, we actually first had to wait for nighttime to come. So while waiting for it to turn to nighttime, I actually decided to get myself a better set of wings, so I went to go farm out some wyverns. I got myself a pair of harpy wings, and once it turned to nighttime, I summoned in and fought Skeletron Prime. Using the Cydia and the pulsar, this was kind of easy, and then after we defeated Skeletron Prime, we actually summoned in a brand new boss called the Rhymegeist. This was a very strange ice creature that honestly resembled to me something that you would find in Undertale. This was a very cool boss fight. It had extremely neat music, but trust me, there's probably a boss even better than this that we will find later within the game. As I defeated this boss, I actually got a brand new yo-yo called the Cryo Ball, which was actually pretty decent for the stage of the game that we were in. And after this, I decided to fight the boss again just to see if it would drop anything else. And one thing that I noticed is it actually had a whole different set of attacks this time. It shot out these rainbow projectiles and kind of had an attack similar to the Empress of Light, so that was pretty neat. But after we defeated this boss a couple of times, the jungle actually grew restless, meaning that chlorophyte is now available for us to pick up, and along with this, we can mine ourselves a brand new set of ore called Burn Shock. This provided us with post-mechanical boss weapons that honestly ended up carrying me all the way until Moonlord. So as soon as I could, I crafted myself a full set of Burn Shock armor, crafted myself one of these Burn Shock swords, and then I set out to go and try and find Plantera. As I went over to the jungle, I scoured my way to find the best place to summon in Plantera, and once I made myself a tiny little arena, I decided to summon her in. I honestly thought this boss fight was going to be far harder than it actually was, but using some of the Burn Shock items, we absolutely blasted through Plantera and very quickly got access to Golem's temple. Almost immediately upon coming into his temple, I quickly cleared it, made myself an arena inside of where we would spawn him, and then I went to go pick up some lizard power cells. I summoned in and killed Golem a couple of times just to get ourselves a bunch of beetle husks so we can craft ourselves a pair of beetle wings, and upon coming back to spawn, I did realize that there was a brand new boss summon that we could actually craft for a post-Plantera boss from the Aerovelence mod. This was called Cyvercry, and it required an obsidian eye to summon him in. I honestly was not ready for this boss whatsoever, but regardless, I summoned in this boss and I had no idea what to expect. The first thing I realized is that it was kind of like one of the twins, and it also reminded me a little bit of Calamitas. I think the AI is very similar, but the way that it dashes at you is very unique, and I really respect the mod developers for adding something like this. It had a rapid fire attack that shot out tons of lasers that was very hard to avoid, and throughout the entire boss fight, I managed to get to half HP, and he actually managed to transform, but before I could defeat it, it ended up taking me out. I decided to challenge it the next night because I could not be asked to do it right now, and as it turned day, we actually got invaded by pirates. I took out the pirates kind of quickly, didn't really bother too much with them. I went to go take out Golem a couple more times, and as it turned to nighttime, I actually buffed up and fought the Cyvercry one more time. We got him down pretty low, and I actually managed to take him out this time. As we killed the boss, I got myself a brand new yo-yo called the Cyver Throw, which was extremely powerful. I'm pretty sure it dealt over like 100 damage, and to add insult to injury, I went out of my way to make myself a master yo-yo bag, so our yo-yo would be absolutely overpowered. As soon as I had the Cyver Throw and I made myself the master yo-yo bag, I got myself a pair of beetle wings, and then I went to to go fight the solar pillar. Once we took out the solar pillar, I actually fought the destroyer a couple more times to grind out myself a bunch of money so we can go and craft ourselves master ninja gear. Once I had this and the ability to dash, I was far more confident to take out any boss that got in my way. So after this, I went to go reforge all of my accessories, and once that was done, I went to go fight and defeat the vortex pillar. Once the vortex pillar was taken out, I teleported all the way to the right side of the world and started challenging the nebula pillar. Once the nebula pillar was taken out, there was only one pillar left before we could fight Mr. Squiggles, so I bought a bunch of buff potions and went to go take out the Stardust pillar. It took me a couple of tries, but I managed to actually lower its HP all the way down to 0, and as I came back to spawn, my screen started shaking. I buffed up as soon as Moonlord spawned in, and using the Cyver throw, I started damaging his eyeballs as much as I could. This was a very slow and grueling process, as yes, I mean this yo-yo was fairly powerful, but it really wasn't good enough to take on Moonlord. I managed to take out both of his eyes, and then his main eyeball using the Cyver throw, and then the solar eruption sometimes as well, just to deal a little bit of extra damage. And once his core opened up, we spammed him with the solar eruption, and then finished him off with the Cyver throw yo-yo. Upon defeating Moonlord, we could finally say that we finished the Aerovelence mod, but of course there's still so much more content that I haven't covered in this video. Be sure to check out another video like this on screen, consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. This has been Boio, peace out.